Well, 2025 is gone and 2026 is here. It's Happy New Year all around the world. And here on Stay the Water, all year long we brought you movers, shakers, and policymakers to discuss issues important to you and the community. And in 2026, we're going to do the same. But you're joining us now as we take a look back at 2025 and look forward at 2026. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Eric Claville, and you're joining us for our New Year's Day show as we take a look back at 25 and forward in 26. Once again, we want to thank you for joining us, as you always do, as we broadcast from none other but the campus of the Norfolk State University, home of the Spartan Nation, from none other than WNSB Hot 91, the soul of VA. You know, we've been very fortunate to do this show now since 2020, and we've welcomed in a half a decade of New Year's for you and with you. As our dedicated listeners, we've gained many listeners over the years and across the country and really the world, because you can also listen to us on our TuneIn app as well. And from there, we've been able to engage and talk with not just elected officials on the local and the state and the federal level, but also people in the community that are doing the work, doing our Good News series and our community engagement series. We also have been able to speak with CEOs of organizations and people that are making a difference. And we've been doing that every single year. So I want to thank you for your dedication to WNSB Hot 91, the soul of VA, and to Stay the Water, to make us the number one talk radio show on Sunday here on WNSB. We could not have done it without you. And we also want to wish you a very happy new year. You know, 2025 was a rocky year for many reasons that we'll talk about, but we actually talked about a lot of it, whether it be the new administration, the draconian cuts through government, also the market going up and down, the uncertainty in the world of different wars, and also conflicts. But whatever the case may be, we covered it here. We talked about the hard issues. We pulled the covers back and showed you what was really happening so that you can make a more well-informed decision. And in 2026, we're going to continue to do just that. But with every new year, you take a look back and you analyze and compare the years before. As the old saying said with Ronald Reagan, are you better 4 years ago? Are you better today than you were 4 years ago? Well, every year we like to ask ourselves, have we fulfilled our resolutions that we made at the beginning of last year by the end of the year? Or did we forget them by January 31st? And did we let that gym membership expire, right? But, here on Stay the Water, we don't measure ourselves by, what people think we should do. But we measure ourselves by you, the community, and engaging the questions and the people by what you asking us to do here for you. So with that being the case, we're going to take a look back at what we did in 2025 and also in what's going to happen in 2024. According to the Associated Press, we had battlefronts in Ukraine to the destruction in Gaza. 2025 was marked by conflict, political upheaval, extreme weather across the globe. This year also saw Trump's meeting on the world stage. They saw the election of Pope Leo, the widespread unrest from Africa to Asia, also here in the United States, natural disasters, lasting damage, wildfires, floods, earthquakes, hurricanes, striking communities from Southern California to Europe to the Pacific. There were also moments of global moments of attention, of human resilience as well, from mass weddings in Gaza to Saudi Arabia, mass markings of major birthdays here across our world. But one thing about 2025, we cover these issues, and not just that, but we cover local issues and state issues. Here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, more specifically, we covered historical election of our very first woman to lead the Commonwealth of Virginia as governor. That's right. Just in as little as 13 days, the first female governor will be inaugurated here in the Commonwealth. But also in 10 days, we'll have the start of our General Assembly session. And we're going to cover all that, especially next, taking a look at the General Assembly and what's happening, and also the inaugural events and those things that are taking place. We're going to look at all these and we're going to look at them in depth, as we always do. But last year was very special because not only did we cover the election of the first woman governor, we also covered the election of the first African-American attorney general to the Commonwealth of Virginia and the first Muslim that is going to be the lieutenant governor. This was a historic moment where we also had two women running for governor, and the first black woman that made a major endorsement of a party. It was so many firsts that we had. 2025 seemed like a year of major progress. And also here at Norfolk State, we secured the only gubernatorial debate in the entire state. So that was held in the Performing Arts Center with the name of the first African-American governor. Now, when we talk about historic, these are historic moments. When we talk about first, this was the place for first. And when we talk about progress, Virginia showed progress. Progress in the areas of also, when we take a look at what took place in the legislature. We had 13 seats that were won by the Democrats for a supermajority. We also saw the appointment of the first appointments of members from Norfolk State that are appointed to the governor's cabinet as secretaries. There's a lot of great things that are happening in the latter part of 2025. But we can't forget about the beginning of 2025 as well here in the Commonwealth of Virginia and across the world. Who can forget about the inauguration of President Donald Trump in his second term, where he was elected again after not being elected consecutively. In other words, he came back from the 45th to the 47th president. That is a tremendous feat within itself, because to remain relevant over the course of 12 years is truly a remarkable feat. But he was able to do it. He was able to bring together in his constituents and the majority of the country to bring him back in office. But not only that, but there was also, for those that supported the president, there was also trepidation for many because of the speed of changes that took place in our government. That's right. We're talking about changes that took place according to Project 2025. And more specifically, when we look at DOGE, they call it government efficiency, where Elon Musk took a chainsaw to government and basically decimated a lot of jobs. A lot of people lost jobs. A lot of people lost careers. A lot of people lost their families because they had to move. A lot of people lost, community because they lost their jobs and careers just very quickly without notice. We also can't forget about the bombing that took place, in which we would travel halfway across the world and bombed Iran and flew back. We can't forget about what was taking place toward the end of the year in what's happening in Venezuela between the United States and also Venezuela. We can't forget about, the ICE and what's happening across the country here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, where we have mass agents that are taking people and checking them for papers. Now, we've seen this before, over 100 years ago, when free blacks had to carry their papers with them to show that they were free. And, of course, being stopped by anybody or former law enforcement and former slave catchers to check them. We're seeing it over again with ICE acting under the color of law, and more specifically, checking Hispanic Americans. Who can forget all these things that took place in 2025? Again, it was a year of promise, a year of firsts, a year of historic feats, but it was also a year of trepidation. It was a year where individuals were afraid because of the uncertainty. These are all things that we covered during this time period. And listen, not just that, but when we also talk about politics on a larger level, we also look at not just spending cuts, but debates over voting rights and the restructuring of federal agencies, more specifically, the decimation of the Department of Education. We took a look at and discussed our society and our culture and how various things that helped to shape us were coming back and asking us to redefine who we are. Remember, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, these became very bad words, very bad acronyms for things that represented our nation, or so we thought. It caused us to take a look at ourselves, caused us to take a look at who we are, and more specifically, who we want to be. These were some very key factors in when we covered 2025. And more specifically, when we take a look at different stories and guests that we've had on the show. I can go all the way back to the early months of January of 2025, where every year we take a look at our General Assembly. And we take a look at our General Assembly, we also take a look at people that are shaping policy for us. And with that, we talk with legislators. Every year, we started with a tradition. We kicked it off with none other than my good friend, an NSU alum, none other than Delegate Cliff Hayes, Jr., who let us know what was going on in the General Assembly for 2025. Like I said, it's become like a tradition for us. And Cliff Hayes is a true supporter of his beloved institution. But we also talked about the inauguration of MLK Day and the significance of it, especially on the Trump administration, with my good friend and award-winning journalist, Dr. Will Levis, who's no stranger to this station or to this area. And then we brought on more legislators, such as Delegate Michael Fagans, who is an NSU alum, that also discussed with us about the legislature, what to look forward to, and what was really happening and taking place. In addition to that, we also we looked at the month of February when we looked at Sine Die and what really took place and what happened. We also talked with our delegate, Delegate Benita Anthony, who represents Norfolk State University, and really what is happening, what happened in the legislature, and the impacts that it would have on us in our communities and in our Commonwealth. And then we took a look at midterm elections. Midterm elections, more specifically on a local level. There were major elections that were happening. Both, we saw a change in the Commonwealth's attorneys, both in, one, of course, in Newport News, and it was a challenge in Norfolk. And we took a look at the candidates and had them on the show to talk about their differences and what they would do here in Norfolk. But also, we talk about the treasurer positions. The treasurer in Newport News was a major contestant, where Sanu Cooper, she came out on top in the primary and in the general election. When we talk about the Commonwealth's attorney, Raman Fadahi, here in Norfolk, held on to his seat despite a major challenge that came for his seat. And then we had our community conversations. We had our community conversations with organizations that are doing the work of the community, making a difference in everything from sports, such as Vernon Lee Jr., who is a co-founder of Hampton Roads Youth Foundation. Also, not just sports, but in the area of taking sports into business with legendary Joe Smith, former NBA player, and his organization, where he talked about his basketball academy. And then we also talked with a former city councilwoman and her very courageous and bold initiative when surviving through mental health and having community conversations with former Councilwoman Royster. And then from there, we also, once again, re-engaged many others from the legislature to talk about what is happening, and also the recap from award-winning journalist Leonard Colvin of the oldest African-American newspaper here in Virginia that spoke about the impact that the election had. These are all people that we spoke with, all people that we covered during 2025. And then, yes, as I've said before, we got right into the election year, right into the election where we had many discussions about the impact of 2025, the governor's election, and also the executive houses. So that was us here on Stay the Water. Can you believe that we cover those many topics? Fresh topics every single week. We uncovered them. We ended up going deep into conversation about its impact, because that's what we do here on Stay the Water. That's the impact that we want to have, and that's what makes us different. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Eric Claville, and you're joining us for our New Year show. Happy New Year to everyone out there around the world, and those of you that are listening to WNSB Hot 91 and Solar VA. You're joining us for our Looking Back, Looking Forward show. Every year for the last half decade, we've been able to broadcast, and you've been able to join us as we took a look back at what was happening in the previous years, and we were able to look forward to what the promise of the coming year. You know, here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we had major historic firsts, from the election of our first female governor, our first African-American attorney general, and our first Muslim elected to lieutenant governor and statewide office for that matter. And also coming off an election or campaign where you had two women and also a black woman on the ticket for governor. These are major historic firsts for not just Commonwealth of Virginia, but also for our country. When you think about it, this is what the future looks like. But we also had a lot of trepidation with the policies of the Trump administration. Elections are won, elections are lost. We salute the winner, and we also pray that their policies and that they become successful in creating good policies for everyone across the board, fair and equitable. However, under this administration, there have been some questionable policies that have put the everyday working people and families scratching their heads, from the suffering of farmers. And here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, our agriculture is a major business as well, to cuts in federal government, again, impacting the Commonwealth of Virginia. And then not just that, but also our military, which is another major engine, a driver here in our community, here in the Commonwealth, especially Hampton Roads. And let's not forget about the cuts to the veterans, to our veterans, whether it be the hospitals, whether it be the services. Veterans saw, and they were not just cut, but they have quite a bit of worry because of those cuts, even with the support lended to the administration. So these are all issues that we cover in 2025. But it doesn't go away, because 2026, guess what comes on board? The impacts of the Big Beautiful Bill. The Big Beautiful Bill, which is the budget bill that was passed. A lot of those provisions, they start now. Now, some may not go into actual action, or you may not see it until another year or 2 years with the provisions. But there are some that are immediate. Some of those immediate cuts is funding the tax cuts. So the monies that were pulled back from funding expanded Medicare, expanded Medicaid for individuals to have health insurance through what's called Obamacare, was in effect defunded. So therefore, states are feeling the effects. And right now, the Commonwealth of Virginia will go into session in the next 10 days dealing with these budget cuts that we see that we're going to have. On top of the cuts by DOGE, on top of other draconian cuts made prior to DOGE and even after DOGE, and the impact of the policies from the Department of Education. We're going to continue to focus on these because this is what's driving public policy for every state, more specifically for the Commonwealth of Virginia. It's all about the economy. It's all about the budget. It's all about policies moving ahead and seeing how they impact us. In addition to that, we're also going to look at the policies around marijuana and the impact of that. The president signing the executive order, taking the high schedule of marijuana, being classified to a lower schedule. However, it has not come into effect just yet. So what does that mean? What does that mean for retailers? What does that mean for the culture of marijuana and how society accepts it? And how will the Commonwealth of Virginia deal with it as well? But not just that, but we're also are still dealing with the impact of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, especially on the level of education. Universities saw themselves, especially here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, UVA, that were attacked by the administration, or some may say held accountable, not to include any programs for diversity, equity, and inclusion, or risk federal funding being taken away. There were other institutions that they have settled with the administration because of that. More specifically, some of the Ivy League schools. So all of this has taken a lot of individuals aback about what is the future and where do we go from here. But you know what? There's something else that's taking place, and we're going to cover these because they are ongoing as it relates to not just the United States, but more specifically the Commonwealth of Virginia. And that is the midterm elections. Now, right now, the midterm elections in 2026, campaigning has already started. 1/3 of the U.S. Senate will go up for re-election, and also the entire House of Congress. That's all 435 seats, and also 1/3 of the U.S. Senate, which is 33 seats, and in some years 34 because of the number of senators that we have, which is 100. When you take a look at what's really happening, when you take a look at what's going on, right now, the control of Congress will be the backstop on any policies moving forward. Now, right now, the Republicans, they have a full House. No pun intended, right? House of Congress, full House. They've got a full House. They've got control of the House of Representatives. They got control of the Senate. They've got control of the White House. And in effect, they have control of the U.S. Supreme Court because of a 6-3 conservative margin and a hard line for conservatives. And so for the most part, there are only 3 liberals on the court or non-conservatives. So in effect, even if you get a plurality decision without a majority decision or supermajority decision, liberals are going to be always in the minority. So their dissent is the major part that counts. But this is not a constitutional law class, even though I love teaching it. But this is a look at our government. So when you take a look at what's happening, the midterm elections will be the backstop on any policies coming out of the White House. So the executive orders, will they have the same impact as the legislation? Can Congress, if it's controlled by Democrats, can they make a difference? Can they slow down what's happening? Can they reverse any of the policies? Is there a plan in place like Project 2025? We don't know. We don't know, but certainly we shall see. So the midterm elections is a major, major point for this year coming up. And when we talk about this year is a special year. It is 2026, which means that it is the 250th anniversary of the Republic. So, in other words, the United States, 1776, got independence. So it is the birth, really, of the Republic that we have. So you're going to see a lot of celebrations for what we call 250. And for Virginia, it's called VA 250. We were selected as the state to lead efforts to celebrate the 250th anniversary of our country. A major moment. You know, when you take a step back and you really think about, what's happening, that is an absolutely huge accomplishment. 250 years that we have here where our republic has gone through so much, but we're still standing. And that's one thing that makes us great about this country. It's one thing that makes us great, moving forward. When we think about, things are a little tight. However, this is what really matters, where we have an opportunity to really work things out. So no matter what happens, it still works, right? But you know what? When we take a look at midterm elections and we take a look at our country, we talked about our country 250, and of course we can talk about the Constitution itself, the Constitutional Convention, the ratification of it, and so forth and so on. But one thing about it, when you tie in midterm elections, when you tie in the 250th anniversary of our country. There's something about the elections and how it all works. And every state gets a certain amount of representatives based on population, but the states get a chance to draw the lines to determine who represents who in our state. Therefore, what I called last year the redistricting arms race is still on. Here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and we're going to cover this, you can look for Virginia to continue to lead the effort as one of the states for redistricting. That means if the United States, according to WUSA Channel 9, if the United States political world were a person with two eyes, they said at least one eyeball would be on Virginia. Now, when we talk about Virginia, we're talking about not just the governor's race, but we're talking about redistricting. That's right. So the Democrats are looking for redistricting because of what the Trump administration did as well in Texas, in Florida, and, of course, in Missouri, where they drew lines and eliminated one Congressional Black Caucus member district. I mean, if they say this isn't racial gerrymandering, that proves it itself. Also in Texas, they eliminating the district for where Jasmine Crockett is currently representing. Now, again, these things are strategic. They just don't happen. But the Democrats with the power in the House, they won a 64-36 margin right now. You know, again, this is what I call a super majority. They're looking now at redrawing these lines and having a majority Democrat control congressional delegation coming out. You know, one thing about, this Congress that we currently have, Virginia tends to work together very well to get initiatives passed, especially funding, no matter what side you're on for the Commonwealth. And that's one thing that they do very well. This political battle that we're taking a look at right now is going to be one to watch. And unfortunately, it's one that was started, and we don't know where it'll stop. Indiana was the canary in the coal mine, if I could use that analogy for the Republicans, where they say, you know what, we're a Republican state, but we're not run by outside politics of the White House. We're run by our state. So they said no to it. So you can look at Virginia being a part of that. And again, this is how we see things taking place and shaping up in 2026. You know, one thing about this show is that we've been able to come and talk with you about what's really happening on a timely matter. I mean, sometimes we talk about things that happen as soon as the show ends. 2 hours, 1 hour, it happens. Especially when we talked about the President Joe Biden stepping down. You know, that was where we were wondering what was going to happen, but we brought it to you right after it happened, right before it happened. There are many shows we talk about the trends that are happening, and we end up giving you foresight of what's moving ahead. And we're going to continue to do that here in 2026 because this is where we bring movers, shakers, and policymakers to you to discuss issues important to the community. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to come into your home, your car, across your phone to deliver this to you. And I'm very fortunate and blessed to do this. I thank God for his many blessings in 2025, and I'm looking for greater in 2026. And greater comes here at this institution, on this air, and on State of Water. Once again, I want to thank you for joining us. We hope you had a phenomenal 2025, and we pray that you're going to have even more phenomenal 2026. Thank you for joining us here on State of Water. Until next time, be good, be great, God bless, and yes, we will see you next week. Happy New Year to all of you.
Hi, I'm Carrie Washington, and you're listening to State of the Water with award-winning host Dr. Eric Claville.